Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now let's turn to Haiti. The funeral of the assassinated President Jovenel Moïse took place there on Friday. He was shot dead in his home 3 weeks ago. Protesters blocked the streets in his hometown of Cap Haitian with burning tires as they demanded justice for him. So far, more than 20 people, mostly Colombian nationals, have been arrested in connection with the assassination. And earlier today came the news that the president's former security chief, Jean Laguel Civil, has also been detained and is being kept in solitary confinement, suspected of involvement in the plot. But it's still not clear who ordered the killing. Last week, it was announced that Ariel Henry, a neurosurgeon, has become Haiti's new prime minister. He'd been chosen for that post by President Moïse. New elections are due to take place in September. The United States has urged Mr. Henry to seek a broad political consensus in Haiti and to work quickly to establish conditions for free and fair elections. Soon after taking office, Mr. Henry said he was confident Mr. Moïse's killers would soon face justice. Well, for his analysis of what's been happening in Haiti, I'm joined now on the line by the crisis management consultant Francisco Quinones, who specializes in negotiations and evacuations from conflict zones, as well as in global private security operations, including in Haiti. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Quinones, for joining us. And are you confident yourself, based on your experience and knowledge of these things, that Haiti is getting closer to the truth of the people who assassinated President Jovenel Moïse?
It is very difficult to determine whether they will get closer to the truth or not. I think the general sense is that Haiti is looking for stability first. Let's keep in mind that this is just one more crisis of many crises in the history of Haiti. There is a serious concern that there's going to be a partial cover-up, at least in getting to the main people behind the assassination, and the focus is shifting over to stability.
Let's take this in bits. You talked about the importance and the necessity of stability. What do you make of the appointment of Mr. Henry and his chance of bringing some sort of political stability to Haiti? He's the new prime minister there.
Well, there's two parts to this. The challenge is great. Not only do they have to deal with COVID, they still have to deal with the recovery of the disastrous earthquake in 2010, but they have an increasingly rising crime wave, including excessive kidnappings. Add that the economic turmoil of which Haiti has never been able to stabilize is a major challenge for Henry to handle. But let's look at the positive part to it. The fact that there was a safe and secure transition of power from the interim prime minister to the appointed prime minister is a positive sign in Haiti. Now, some people are seeing this as a transition, and the fact that it's been peaceful without more conflict, and it brings some positive hope to Haiti. The challenge minister comes in after the elections.
Right. Well, let me move it away from sort of the political issues and who gets appointed prime minister and so on. Obviously, the international community hoping that the appointment of Mr. Henry will bring stability. He is clearly an expedient choice. But let's talk about the area that you specialize in, private security organizations. Perhaps another word for that would be mercenary organizations around the world. What can you tell us about these 20 people that have been arrested so far in Haiti? They're mostly Colombian mercenaries. How confident can we be that we'll get behind the truth of who hired them? What do you know?
Let's take a step back and make the difference between security companies and criminals that take on these type of assignments. There's a lot of confusion between the hiring of the Colombians. In fact, it is known that many of them did not even know that there was going to be an assassination until days before it happened. Even during the day of the operations, most of them thought it was going to be an arrest of the president. So there definitely has been some deception from the people that hire them into at least a good part of the Colombians that were involved. Now, there were some that knew about it and they should be prosecuted, but there's a big difference between private security companies and guns for hire. Here we have a mix of two. We know that some of the Colombians were initially hired by a company in Miami to go do close protection of executives. That mission changed to arrest the president. They were shown what they thought was an official arrest warrant, and turned out to be an assassination. So there's still a lot of smokescreen behind this, whether it's actually a mercenary team that was sent in to kill the president, or whether they were being pawns of other people behind it, the masterminds behind it.
That's a very good point, because there seems to be this growing sense that the Colombians did not actually have much to do with the assassination, because it seems, according to some reports, that they may have arrived on the scene of the assassination after the president was already dead. And there are also Haitian police involved. I mean, they've just arrested the head of the president's security guard. And I just wondered what your take is on that.
There's 2 points that are very important. One, there are conflicting reports. Some say that they arrived after the president was assassinated. Others say that they arrived right around the time when he was assassinated. Let's let the investigation play out. But there's 2 key factors here to look into. One, the fact that they were all captured very, very expediently within a few hours after the assassination. Now, Haiti's police force has never been that effective as after this incident. So it makes you wonder whether somebody actually turned them in to get captured. Now, these guys are Colombian Minimum Special Forces. They're the people, if they were going to do an assassination against somebody, they planned it properly, or they have an exfiltration plan in place. This was either a very clumsily planned operation or a mix of somebody turning them in, where many of them did not actually know this was going to happen. The other part is the presidential guard did not fight back. There's a lot of questions of why is it the presidential guard, some of the best trained men in Haiti, allowed this to occur. So those are questions that the investigators are looking into how much of this was actually a guns for hire mercenary hit, and how much of this was just one part of a bigger plot.
Again, very good analytical points that you raise there. And part of the problem here clearly must be that the people who are investigating are the Haitian police, and they are investigating in part the Haitian police. And as we all know, that's not a good situation in law and justice, is it? I mean, you don't investigate yourself.
There is a good point, but let's keep in mind that they did ask for help. Colombian officials and U.S. officials did go to Haiti to help with the investigation. So it's not a smokescreen where the Haitian police is going to bury this investigation. There's bigger interests at stake where both the U.S. and the Colombian governments are involved. Remember, these are Colombian citizens and 2 U.S. Haitian citizens involved. So there are interests, besides the geopolitical interests at stake, there are interests on the legal side on investigating an assassination where some of your citizens are involved. So they are getting external help.
And you mentioned the US there. Of course, America has quite a lot of influence over Haiti, especially historically. How do you see that situation with regard to what's happening in Haiti today?
It definitely opens up the analysis of greater geopolitical concerns in the Caribbean. Let's keep in mind that one of the longest, if not the longest, foreign occupation of the United States was in Haiti. Coincidentally, when the previous president was assassinated in 1915. That lasted until 1934, where the U.S. pretty much took control of the central bank, installed a pro-American president, and allowed for the legislature to allow for foreign ownership of land in Haiti. This was at the wake of World War I, so there was security concerns involved. There was also talks about the United States opening up a naval base in Haiti. That never came through, but the Caribbean itself is coming back to the forefront of U.S. foreign policy. Not only did you have the recent protests in Cuba, you have the ongoing instability situation in Venezuela, and you have the assassination in Haiti. So it brings to the forefront of U.S. foreign policy the Caribbean and north part of South America. Which direction the U.S. policy is going to take, it's to be determined. Do keep in mind that initially they supported Prime Minister Emmanuel, the interim prime minister, and then they switched to Ariel Henry. So it looks like, at least for now, the focus is going to be to bring stability to Haiti.
Right. Well, we'll keep watching to see what happens with the Americans. But we've seen protesters in Haiti demanding justice. I wonder where the Haitian people are in all of this. I mean, did they really have great affection for the previous president? Because many have been very critical of his leadership, and he presided over a lot of problematic aspects of the country. Do people feel a sense of support for him, or is this more of a general call for justice within Haiti? Because a lot of people are alleged to have been killed under President Moïse.
Correct. What you're seeing here is not so much empathy for the president, but there's a lot of frustration that they can't get anything done. There's already conflict between the president and some members of what he used to call the oligarchs. There was accusations that the president had some of the gangs under his control and using them to intimidate some of the business people. So there's the constant quid pro quo frustration between the people, the government, and some of the economic people in power. What you're seeing right now is an accumulation of all the frustration of politics, economics, crime, development, and the people are tired. They say, we want stability, we want to move forward, we don't want this to keep going on. It's a cycle that has kept repeating itself. One thing to add to this, let's remember that during this incident, the Haitian government asked for the U.S. to send military support. The Pentagon resisted, and they said, no, we're not going to send troops. But it reached that point where the government itself was asking for military intervention to bring stability. So there's an overall sense of frustration. Let's stop.
And you mentioned the gangs there that seem to proliferate and seem to have so much power. How is that possible?
Well, there's two reasons why gangs are afraid. One of them is a lack of security, and usually the lack of security is because lack of training, lack of equipment, lack of funds. And in Haiti, you have all that. Add to that extreme poverty. Anywhere in the world where there's extreme poverty, there's no chance of work, there's no jobs, no economic, people are going to start stealing. The first part is going to be for survival. The second part is going to be in an organized manner that become semi-organized gangs like you have in Haiti.
Right. We've got about a minute or so before we have to take a break, but hopefully we'll keep chatting with you if you don't mind, because I've got a couple of other questions I'd like to get to, including the history of Haiti, which of course has a significant, I suppose, part to play in what Haiti has become today, and also the fact that a lot of people must just feel very upset that a Haitian president can be assassinated in his own home, irrespective of how people might feel about him. But please stay with us. We're very glad that you can share some of your thoughts about all this with us. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our analysis of the latest developments in Haiti. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, amid the ongoing investigations into the assassination of the Haitian President Jovenel Moïse, there are lots of unconfirmed reports flying around of what appear to be efforts to obstruct the investigation surrounding Mr. Moïse's assassination. Haitian police have meanwhile arrested the head of President Moïse's security team as part of the ongoing investigation into his killing on July the 7th. Security Chief Jean Laguerre Civil is suspected of involvement in the plot that saw Mr. Moïse killed at his home in the middle of the night by armed commandos who bypassed the president's guards without firing a shot. Details of the assassination remain unclear, but newly installed Prime Minister Ariel Henry has promised to bring Mr. Moïse's killers to justice. Some 20 Colombian nationals are already in custody as part of a plot police say was organized by a group of Haitians with foreign ties, but have presented no evidence to support this. and the crisis management consultant, Francisco Quinones, who specializes in negotiations and evacuations from conflict zones, as well as in global private security operations, including in Haiti, is still with me on the line. And I understand you're in Mexico. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Tell us a bit about your involvement in Haiti. You've done some work there, apparently.
The work we've done in Haiti has been primarily with negotiations of people that have been kidnapped. There were some requests for evacuations during the recent crisis. We advised against evacuating. We didn't think the situation warranted it. It was best to stay in place. But in the past, since the earthquake 2010, there was a rapid increase in kidnappings, which I've been involved in the negotiation safe release of the victims.
How challenging is that? I mean, people who are kidnapped, are these life and death sort of situations?
Most of the times, it has to do with money, with people that kidnap someone because they need money. And we find out that kidnapping thrives in places where there is extreme poverty, a very marked difference between rich and poor, and a very weak security system. And Haiti is one of those places that has all those factors for kidnapping to thrive. In the absence of a very good police investigative system, kidnapping is going to thrive. That's why everyone finds it so stunning that the police, who have a hard time doing basic kidnap rescues in the course of the assassination.
Yeah, we lost a bit of what you said there because a slightly wobbly line, I'm afraid. That's the challenge of sometimes using the internet. But let me move away from your own personal experience to get your general analysis, which we appreciate very much indeed. We were talking earlier about the way Haitians are reacting to the assassination of their president. I mean, people there must feel very upset that a Haitian president can be assassinated in his home, supposedly surrounded by his security people. But, I mean, those security people apparently weren't even there. How could that have happened? I mean, you've got experience of military matters and security and so on. How could that have happened in his bedroom? I mean, it must be very shaming to Haitians that this could happen, and it must be very disturbing.
It is. That's why there's a lot of conspiracies and a lot of tangents to this investigation that, hey, this couldn't have been done by 26 Colombians that went into the house and nobody else stood against them. Not a single presidential guard fired against them. They're able to get right to it. Now, let's also take a step back, the fact that they used the cover pretending to be DEA agents. That shows you how much power just pretending to be a foreign U.S. government agent has over the local population. They screamed DEA. Some of the guards were probably taken aback and said, okay, we're not going to fight against the DEA. But they didn't even speak English. They spoke Spanish. So the fact that there's no resistance to protecting the president brings to the forefront, did the Colombians actually kill him or was he already dead? And when they went in there, did anyone in his security team, the presidential Moises security team, participate in it or not? The people frustrated, one, because how come they did not defend the president? And if they did not defend him, were they involved in it or not? And now whether the investigation moves forward or not, it's going to be even more frustration. Are they going to shift over to stability or are they going to continue investigation? So there's an overall sense of frustration at the incident itself.
Yes, absolutely. But in the circumstances that this took place, and given the things that you've just mentioned, I mean, do you think the arrest of the former security chief of President Moïse is crucial? I mean, he's suspected of involvement in the plot and is being held in solitary confinement at the moment.
Let's keep in mind that he is being a suspect right now. He's being held in confinement for questioning, so he doesn't have to talk to anybody else. There's a difference between someone being guilty of participating in it, like the Colombians were to a certain extent, either directly assassination or facilitating it, and versus someone that's being taken into custody for questioning. So that does not mean he is guilty. He's a suspect. They're questioning to see if there's any involvement or cooperation by the security teams. So I don't want to jump to conclusions and say they were involved. They're being questioned at this point.
Yes, that's fair enough. But we talked about delving a bit into the history. Haiti, of course, the poorest country in the Americas, and there's historic factors behind that, aren't there? There was that horrific earthquake a decade ago that you mentioned, and the cholera epidemic that followed it, and that was surely a negatively transforming event, and it destroyed a lot of the already quite thin social structure that existed there from the time of the slave revolution 200 years ago, and things have continued to drift in a depressing direction in many ways. All that legacy and its aftermath still shaping the wider social changes in Haiti.
Not only is Haiti going through its worst crisis now, let's keep in mind, it was the first country in the Americas to obtain, in Latin America, to obtain its independence. And yet, after 200 years, it hasn't been able to stabilize itself. There's greater interest at play. The Caribbean itself, geopolitically, it's very, very powerful. The fact that Cuba is still an opposition state to the United States, you have Venezuela on the south side, and you have the island of Hispaniola divided. Sometimes Dominican Republic and Haiti have conflicting governments. The rivalry between the Trujillo dictatorship and Papa Doc and Baby Doc, that still plays today, where the two countries continuously seal their border one way or the other for no apparent reason. So there's a lot of geopolitical interest here. What we're looking at right now is not just current stability, it's not just ending crime, it's not just investigation. You're pretty much looking as close as you can get to a failed state while it still operates. You're talking about nation building. There needs to be a proper effort from the US and Latin American countries to do proper nation building in Haiti, restructure it from the bottom up and from the top down. The government still works. The people are still there. They have an economy that functions. It's in shadows, but it functions. But it needs to rebuild. You need a massive program to rebuild Haiti. This is more than just an investigation of a president.
Okay, Mr. Quinones, we've got a few seconds left. What's your prognosis going forward from here? What do you think is likely to happen next?
I think these are days of reckoning. The constitution referendum that's coming up during the next election is going to determine the legal framework for Haiti for the future and whether or not it can build up the challenges to rebuild itself. The prognosis is very challenging. I don't want to say it's good, but I think it's an opportunity to recreate itself from the bottom up.
Mr. Quinones, I want to thank you very much indeed. A very interesting analysis you've given us there. Francisco Quinones is a crisis management consultant who has done some work in Haiti. That's it for this edition of The Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and Mexico, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.